Hey, fellow dads. It's your host, Gerald, Mr. BPOZ Mays, and this is another Good Dads podcast. And today, I have an awesome guest for you. This guest I met in June at a men's health conference, and he has coached my son in basketball over the summer, the last 6 weeks actually. But we really kind of connected at this men's conference because he's just the type of guy that I am. We get into a lot of details about his philosophy on fatherhood and how fathers should show up, as well as a little bit about business. He is the owner of only Three Snacks. It's a snack company where his flagship product is a crisp that only has three ingredients in it. And let me tell you, before we even have him on and have him say a single word, I have to tell you that these snacks are off the chain. And if there's two that you 100% should get, which I'm going to reference in the show, is the salt lime, the hint, I think it's like a pinch of lime flavor, as well as the cinnamon flavor. Ooh, let me tell you, I don't vouch for a lot of things, but I vouch for those two things. So if you have it, get the snacks. All right. But the reason for me bringing Damion on, the reason for me bringing Damion on was because I wanted someone who understood business and then managed that as a father. He has coached his own kids to basketball. His son has played college basketball, so has his daughter. So he has a lot on his plate. And oftentimes as fathers, we find ourselves with a lot on our plate, right? We have to coach our sons, our daughters, little league team. We do Boy Scout troops. We do all of these extracurricular things while we maintain and manage our everyday lives. So it's very important for me to bring Damien on so that he can just discuss just how he handles it all. So without further ado, let's welcome Damion Byrd. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for
Uh,
having me.
how you feeling?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, man. I can't change. I can't complain. I can't complain about anything really. I'm just happy to be above ground, so to speak.
For sure. For sure.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me like your origin story. What's your ethos? Where you come from? How did you get to where you are?
Oh man, it's an evolution, bro. You know what I mean? It's an evolution. I'm from Toledo, Ohio. Um, Proud Toledo, right? I love my hometown. Come from a single parent family. I have a younger brother and recently just lost my younger sister
Oh,
back in December, and then my mother and whatnot.
sorry to
Um,
hear that.
Yeah, it's been rough, man. It's been rough. I'm gonna be honest, but um, I joined the Air Force at 18, but prior to that, um, as it pertains to just my makeup and what made me, man, I'm like I said, I'm a proud Toledoan, and a lot of people had a big part of making me and how I value things and value life and value fatherhood, and it's carried with me today. You know what I mean? I'm old school in my opinion. You know what I mean? Whatever that means, right? Probably to a fault to some, but it's been more good for me than bad for sure.
Okay. So when you say old school, what does that mean? Old school.
Um, Old school in the terms of, like I look at today. Recently I've been kind of coming up with the mindset of like I'm past my time, if
Mm,
you know what I mean, and um, meaning that like the way that I think and value humanity,
mhm,
right? Humanity and all things that have to do with that doesn't seem to jive with what's happening in the world today.
right.
In all aspects, right? So when I say I'm old school, looking out for each other, right? Serving each other, caring about each other, being happy being in another's company, getting to know each other for nothing other than the reason of getting to know each other. You know what I
Right.
mean? And finding ways to help people, man. And I just think that, that train of thought is behind us. You know what I mean? And I can't get past that. You know what I mean? I can't be anything other than that. I'd rather be lonely than to be less than authentic.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that's what I
Yeah.
mean by being old school.
And did you learn that old school mentality from somewhere? Was it instilled in you as a child growing up?
Without a doubt. You know what I mean? Even indirectly, right? Directly and indirectly. Like I'm a very visual person. So I just learned a lot by paying attention to life. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? My dad passed when I was very young at 7 years. I think I was like 7 years old, almost 8 years old, give or take. And but even with that, I like I said earlier, I come from a single parent household. So I relied on, my mother had five sisters and four brothers, right? So I relied on them to take care of me. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
uh, extended family, uh, like it was 10 of my mother and them. So if you can imagine, how that,
I,
how we come from,
I
right?
understand. Hey, my family like that too. I have my dad is one of five, one of 10, and my mom is one of six.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was the norm. So with that, everybody has friends and cousins and all of that. So back home, like un non-blood relatives were family. You feel what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
um the village, right? I have a very, very much a village mindset when it comes to just life, and raising and um my mindset is collaborative, right? How can we combine to make it work for everyone? And I
Right.
and I just cannot get past that. And
Mhm.
even when I probably should or it serves me better, my mindset always comes back to that. So
Right.
I don't know if that answers the question or not,
No,
man.
it does. It does. And you said village. Like I think that sometimes, we all have a different perspective of villages depending on our experiences, right? Like for some, a village could be, what you just said, a collaboration, and other times the village is way, way, way more necessary, like you as well. Father
Right,
passes away when you're 7 or 8 years old. You have to depend on the village for that male influence that I believe all children need, right? All children need some sort of father-like figure in their lives. Not that they don't need a mother. I believe they need both, but there we have a very rich history of fathers not being in homes, especially in our age bracket.
right, for sure.
And I think our age bracket is working tirelessly on, being better fathers and stewards of our families and stuff like that. So tell me a little bit about the village that you grew up in, and how impactful that was on your life growing up.
Yeah, man, like I said, it's like I'm really, if you spend more time with me, I'm really big on the animal kingdom, right? Uh, Especially as it pertains to lions, right? If you ask
Okay.
anybody who's ever been around me or spent time with me, I reference the lion mentality a lot, right?
Hmm.
And the roles as such. And I always say if you watch lions, I always reference the Serengeti quite a bit. If you watch them, they'll teach you everything. They'll teach us as humans everything that we need to know about how we should live, right? The collective, right? The matriarchs, the sisters take care of all of the cubs, right? Everybody, participates in the hunts, all of that. And
Hmm.
it was very like that for me, my mom and her sisters, and her brothers, they took care of not just me, but all of us. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? You know, they took care of all of us, and I was paying attention. You know what I'm saying? I was
Mm-hmm.
paying attention, and um, I use a lot of what I've learned and directly and indirectly, and how I live today personally, how I raise my children. Or all of my children are legal adults, but you never really stop raising them and preparing them. But yeah, the village, man, it was just a time, or it is a time, or I referenced a time when people authentically cared about each other. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? Authentically cared about each other, and it's just the right thing to do, right? The right thing to do is to do things for people for no other reason than it being that. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? And you were fed. You were fed not necessarily food wise, but you were fed from doing. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? And um, that's what kind of, maybe motivate is not the word, but that's what kind of moves me to this day. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
And
Uh,
how has the village shown up in how you currently father your children or have fathered your children?
uh, what do you mean specifically? You mean like the village around me, or the
Yeah.
village?
Like the idea that you have about the importance of the village. How have you intertwined that into how you parent now and how you view parenthood moving forward? Because I know you have two grandchildren as well. So
Yeah.
how do you incorporate all of those philosophies into your current lifestyle, your current household?
Well, I'm gonna be honest, man, it's not well received, right? It's not always well received. And I always tell people, because I'm non-negotiable. I think people want to be people, even adults, right? We want to be pacified. You know what I'm saying? I this is just Damien's viewpoints, but we we've convinced ourselves, maybe good and bad, I guess, but that we're all celebrities, you know what I mean, and VIPs. And there's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean? I don't want to, like, I think what I'm trying to say is going to come out poorly. Um, but like, we live in this time where if you're not, applauding or celebratory in how we interact, then
Hmm.
it's negative. You know what I mean? So
Right.
we miss the lessons, right? We
Right.
miss the lessons, and we miss the message, because it makes us uncomfortable. You understand what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And to answer that question, the way I deal with it is with consistency, right? You may not like it, but it's necessary, and it's going to be that. Like, I'm not going to kind of water myself down, and whatever that means, right?
Right.
Like, I don't want this to sound like I'm some sort of tyrant either.
Hmm.
Uh, but I believe that a consistent interaction with me, as a youngster, is going to leave you better than what you otherwise would have been without that. You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying?
Absolutely.
Without it, and that's non-negotiable.
I have a friend of mine who always says accountability is love, and that's the thing that we are missing. And it feels like if we aren't prepared to hold the people we care about uh, hold them accountable, then do we really love them? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like, are we really going to let the people that we love go out there and do things that we know will not serve them in the future? You know
Right.
what I mean? For the
Right.
sake of, it's kind of like the whole like you hating thing, right? Like
Right.
you tell somebody like, "Hey man, you need to improve in this area," and they call you a hater.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But if I let you walk out there with that outfit on and you get talked about, you're gonna be
Hmm.
looking at me like I'm a terrible friend.
Right. Right.
And how
Right.
many children do you have?
I have four. I have three daughters and one son.
And what are the ages?
30 for my son is my youngest, right? He has a twin sister that's 20. I have a daughter that is about will be 23 here in a few weeks. And then I have a 30-year-old daughter.
Okay.
And I
And
have
how,
a
and what was what was the like as you were raising your children, how did they take your style of parenting?
Um, that's mm, like I said, it hasn't been easy. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? Because here's what I say. What we as parents, no matter what your parenting style is, the the influence that what they have access to in terms of technology and social media and just other children and how they're parented is dominant in terms of what we try and do. You know what I'm saying? Like we can't compete with the influence that outside forces have
Right.
on raising our children. And when you compare that against um our time, right? My time, I'm 50, right? Um, you know, I come from an era where if you had an issue, you got to go through that issue on the whole walk home. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a similar mindset, there was a similar collective, uh, you know, challenge or charge to take care of the whole block, right? Or the entire
Right.
neighbor, right? We were like we were all each other's babies. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And everybody, we didn't just mind our business. You know what I
Right.
mean? We mind, like we took care of everybody. You know what I'm saying? And now it's like you can live on the street for 10 years and not know the people's names 2 houses down from you. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? Because we all mind our own business. We're all in a rush, and I know I'm guilty of it.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and so my children have not, they receive that in a lot of ways when it's convenient for them. You know what I'm saying? I think I have well-behaved children, all of that, but I'd be kidding myself if I said that it was all it's been all all roses and everything
Right.
as it pertains to helping them get out on their own, right? And let,
Right.
and let me just add this really quick, because I'm in constant thought about that too, right? I question myself, like, dang man, is it me? You know what I'm saying? Is
Mm-hmm.
what I think about that, is that so far off base? You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? I'm like, nah, I don't think it is, right? But then, part of me, and let me say this also, I spend a lot of time around young people, right? Between coaching and teaching, I do basketball camps, and I see it a lot, bro. I see it. I see disrespect. I see where there's glaring, unaccountability in the terms of the interaction between young people and adults, young people and each other, all of that. And I just like I don't go for it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And you can tell where there's some negotiation taking place between young people and adults, right? And it's not serving them. So the point I was making is, I was thinking the other day, what we do now is we don't prepare children to be adults, right? We prepare them to be our babies, right?
Mm.
You know what I mean? If you just listen to parents, I won't say parents, I'll say parents, but I will, and this is not an attack on women, right? But, it's mainly moms, you gonna always be my baby, right? And,
Mm.
as it pertains to men, I think a lot of times women treat their sons like they're their spouse instead of their son, right? So
Right.
we can't see them as, hey man, this is going to have to be a functioning man in society. So I got to prepare him to be a man, an independent thinker. If you talk to any of my children, they'll no matter how they feel about their rearing, they're going to tell you my message has been incredibly consistent. I want to prepare you for life in the absence of me and your mom. And
Right.
and and I've been very consistent with that. And as it compares to my childhood, no matter what you think of the influences around you, because everything, I'd be kidding myself or kidding the audience if I said that everything was hunky dory. Like life was hard. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Life was hard for me. Um, and I was always subconsciously preparing myself for it to be better. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right.
Like, and even consciously, I remember being probably 9 or 10 years old, and I said, you know what? I know that I'm going to live. Like this part of my life is going to be different when I get to to this situation. I remember some of that stuff very vividly. Um, so I'm kind of all over the place in answering that question,
No,
but
no, no. I
uh,
like how you like my thing here is like I'm gonna listen to you talk. I like to hear you talk. You
yeah.
know, I because I want your perspective. You said a bunch of key things there. You know what I mean that come up in conversations that I have with other fathers all the time. Right? It's like
Mhm.
the reason why I'm so passionate about this good dads movement thing that I'm trying to create is the lack of fathers in the household is a problem because there's nothing to offset the other stuff that goes on. Like, I'm not a proponent of saying that we just need dads. I believe
Mhm.
we need both parents in the household. That's important.
Mhm.
And dads aren't valued as much as moms because from in our generation, moms have had to step up in ways that fathers haven't been forced to do in certain situations. We've been
What do you mean?
we've been forced to step up financially and everything else and do those things, but the court systems isn't forcing dads to take their kids. You know what I mean? The way that they place them with their mothers. So
Mhm.
as that child is growing up, that dominant influence is coming from one source or one idea. And I don't think that getting all of your influence from one person is going to be good at all whatsoever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
And having somebody else that to counter that is going to always be beneficial for the kid as they grow up. Would you
right.
agree with that statement or would you add anything to that?
I think there's a lot to be added to it because that's the what, right? But we disclude the how and the why. You
Mhm,
see what I'm saying? Like we disclude the how and the why, and I think men get a bad rap, right? Especially in our community because we get perpetuated. So I got a lot to say about that, to be honest.
go ahead.
We get perpetuated as absent fathers, right? Which may or may not be true in some cases, but we neglect the why that is. You know what I mean? Like black men were taken, like we've been, and this isn't even, you can look at the data. The data shows that we've been taken from our homes. You know what
Mhm,
I mean? We didn't choose to not be present in the lives of our children. We were taken, you know
right.
what I mean, through the judicial system and, and, loss of life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and, to another point that you made, there's all of this, well, I'll say this, consequently, or as a result of that, um, we overcompensate today for parenting, right? Because we feel like that we have to, as men, but for sure as black men, that we have to get a pat on the back because we're in our kid's life or in the home with our kid, right? In
Mhm,
the home with our kid, like that needs to be celebrated. I don't see that, right?
right, right.
And to further that point, I don't participate, or I hate to see where we always reference that trauma, right? Or that because we're doing the dirty work of people who bring that to life for them. You see what I'm saying? Like I'm supposed to be a good dad. You're supposed to
Right,
be a good dad. You know what
right.
I mean? We made those choices, right? That goes with the territory of those choices.
Yep.
So I don't need to say, like I love my kids, or to each his own for those who do. I'm just not going to do it, right? Because that's my job. And I think that, that's the job of a mother as well. You see what I'm
Right.
saying? So,
No, I agree with you.
we don't need to be celebrated for parenthood. You know what I'm saying? You just don't, right? So I don't look at it the way. I look at it as my job is to prepare you to be a grown up. You
Right.
see what I'm saying? Right. And that may appear to be harsh, but if you talk to my children, if you talk to my wife, that's what I've done. You know what I'm saying? And that's non-negotiable for me. You know what I mean?
Uh,
That's
no, I
negotiable for
totally
me.
understand. I totally understand what you're saying. I think, and it's funny because like I said, I talked to so many dads, from all different backgrounds, and I feel like that, like how you said, I feel like that about most things in my life, right? But
Mhm.
there's some dads out here that I celebrate dads all the time just because, not because that parenthood shouldn't be celebrated, but knowing where they come from and the examples that they had in front of them, the minimum that we see as what we're supposed to do is a huge accomplishment for that individual,
Certainly.
considering where they came from and the lack of role models and the amount of perseverance that they've had to go through in order to get to that stage. So from a personal standpoint, I 100% resonate with what you're saying. It is my job and it is my duty to do the things that I do for my 4 children, because that was my decision and my choices that I've made, and
Mhm.
that comes with making those decisions.
Certainly.
On the flip side of that, I do have an open heart for the overcomers, the dads who, never had a father figure at home, didn't grow up in a community where positive men were readily available, yet they still strived and overcame and was able to do what we would consider the minimum, so to speak. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yeah, and I think I was fortunate in terms that, you asked the question when we started about how did that, play a role, or how does that play a role in how I see things as an entrepreneur or pursue things as an entrepreneur. Where vision, right? At my vision, I always tell my kids, I can't see well, but my vision is immaculate, right? My vision is really good. And so I've always been able to project out into the future. You know what
Mhm.
I'm saying? I couldn't always decipher why that was happening, but I could kind of see things happening before they're actually happening. You know what I mean? And a negative consequence was enough of a deterrent to get, to keep me on the straight and narrow, right?
Right.
Not that, and I don't think, if you ask the people who know me, I've never been a problem, a behavioral kid, or I was rather quiet for the most part. So I think I would have found my way, but watching all of the things happen around me
Mhm.
was like a motivator for me to, really kind of like mind my own business, and you know figure out my path without doing all of that stuff. I mean, I've never been, in trouble or anything like that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Um, but the other part about that, when you bring it to today, is men, like now, just looking at manhood, right? Sometimes that's synonymous with fatherhood. Just being a man in a lot of ways is frowned upon. They have this term, I don't even know how we arrived at this, called toxic masculinity.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
how can being a man be toxic? You
Right.
know what I'm saying? I don't, I think, that's, like, and you only really see that, or at least I only see it. Maybe I'm too closed off enough, but we only see that in our community. You don't,
Right.
I don't see that. Maybe it is, but you
Yeah,
don't.
I see it. I see it. It's pretty
It's
rampant.
pretty
I see it
widespread.
everywhere. Yeah, I see it
Yeah,
everywhere.
and I'm like, man, I don't subscribe to none of that,
You ever
right?
you ever talk to your daughters about it? Like about what toxic masculinity means to them in their worlds?
I honestly, I don't. I probably should. And this is gonna sound bad, right?
Uh-huh.
This is gonna sound bad, but like, I don't know that I care. You know what I mean? Right now,
Right.
what I'm saying,
Right.
because it's not going to really alter. Like, I do empathize, right? And I want them all to think that they can talk to me, but um, man, I'm 50, bro. You know what I'm saying? And
Uh-huh.
I'm okay with me. You know what I mean? I'm not saying I'm perfect or anything like that, but um, I do have some strong thoughts on what manhood is about, right? I look at, I don't reference it a lot, but I kind of look at the movie Fences. You ever seen that movie Fences with
I,
Denzel Washington?
yeah, I seen it.
Um, and
I've seen the stage play, I think.
yeah, um, there's a spot in there where his son in the movie asked him, well, why, Dad, why don't you like me? You know what I'm saying? Why don't you like me? And he's like, boy, and he answered, boy, you got food on the table, and you got a light,
Mm-hmm.
roof, that kind of thing, right? So like, I take it as to mean your your needs are being met. You know what I'm
Right,
saying?
right, right, right.
And men, right? Manhood, fatherhood, and all of that is a part of being a provider. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? And for me, being a provider is being a preparer. You know what I'm saying? Is being a preparer. So when I compare, when my youngest kid, you just saw my daughter leave, but she's 20. Uh, them at 20 and what they know and what they have been, consistently exposed to in terms of preparing to run their own homes and be good people and all of that is much more than what I was at 20. Right.
Absolutely.
Than what, and not only just how to quote unquote survive, but how to prosper. We prepare for prosperity around here. You
Mm-hmm.
know what I'm saying? And that's hard because, like I mentioned earlier, you have so many forces that think that that's, like let me say it this way. I think that there are so many forces that allow children to think that they're on the same level as their parents, right? And
Okay.
they don't respect the hierarchy. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that you don't have a voice, because you do, right?
Mm-hmm.
But dad is dad, mom is mom, children are children. You know what I'm saying? And I think today children think that, hey, we're lateral, right? We're lateral, and I'm going to speak to you in whatever tone or aggression level that I choose to, whatever. And then us as parents, right? We just kind of teeter on top of it because we don't want to offend. We don't want to offend our children. We don't want them to be angry with us. We think that, them being angry at us is bad parenting, and all of this other, stuff that isn't serving them in their adulthood, right? I saw something the other day, and I can't fact check it or whatever, but it was a, some sort of panel discussion where I think it was 49%. So almost one in two, right? Almost one in two children are being diagnosed with some sort of mental disorder in this country. Now, I can't fact check that, right?
That's pretty accurate.
That's pretty accurate. And I'm
Yeah.
like, what in the world, bro? Like, what in the world is so hard and traumatic for so many children? It doesn't matter if you're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, or whatever in this country. Like you are manufacturing some sort of doggone crises, and
Mm-hmm.
we're going with it. You know what I mean? Like, I was a school teacher for a couple of years, and kids that are behavioral or on some sort of academic plan, IEDs and 504s. And I just look at why that is. And I'm like, man, that's not necessary, bro. You know what I'm saying? Accountability, right? We're not doing the hard stuff as men, as parents, as adults, right? To to straighten kids out. You know what I'm saying? If maybe that might be, you know, non-politically correct, in that terms, but like, so I'll say it a little differently, to prepare them for, what life has in store for them, right? We got
Right.
to, right? And I say that from the standpoint of being a teacher, of being a 25 plus year coach, being
Mm-hmm.
a 30-year dad, right? All of that stuff. And I just look at it and I'm like, man, I come back to what I said earlier, man, I'm past my time, right? Because
Right.
it's exhausting, and I don't want to claim that I'm perfect by any means,
Mm.
right? But I think that if we take care of each other, we prepare we prepare our children, we hold them accountable. You love them however you love them. You know what I mean? You'll have that percentage go down, right?
Right.
You won't have 49% of people feeling like, hold my hand and, you know what I mean, listen to me because I'm
I
being
think
bullied.
I think the hard part about what you're saying, because I think the hard part about what you're saying is that it is not realistic because we don't have that infrastructure in place. Like you said earlier in your conversation about how you grew up, right? If you had an issue, you had to take that issue on the block, right? Like
Mhm.
everybody mama gonna know and everybody got something to say. But now we live life in a silo, right? We live life in two different places and we're two different people in these lives, right? We live
Mhm.
life in our own silo alone with just a handful of people, if you have them. Or we live life on this grand stage fighting for attention from everybody because we don't get that at home or whatever, right? So when we
Well,
have youth
I,
and kids that's coming up like that, that's their lives as well. So there aren't all of the different people around that can build a sense of community. I would say that alongside of this 49% stat that you mentioned, it's built on the fact that their lives are lonely. It's built on the fact that not just lonely, they don't know where to go to get any of the things that you're talking about that they need because the households don't have them within and there's no community outside for them to go get. So as you speak about our communities and creating these structures that kind of hold our children accountable, like where would you start in trying to grow that, because it's definitely lacking in our communities right now and from all standpoints, really, right?
well, it's a man. You said a mouthful with that, right? And there's a couple of pieces of that I kind of disagree with,
Okay.
right? And yeah, I think you mentioned that um, you said something, and I can't remember exactly, but I think it was to the point where there isn't anything in the house. You referenced loneliness, and there isn't anything in the house to kind of like fill that, and I'm paraphrasing, that gap of loneliness for that kid, right?
Right.
Am I on track with that? You kind of saying that?
Yeah.
And I sort of take issue with that because, or maybe I would just add in what I see, especially, I'm not going to say that, right? I'll just say, um, I disagree with that because it's a matter for me in what I've seen and how that kid and maybe even that parent or those parents feels like their kids should be treated, right? Because now we treat our children as if they all have to be royalty, right? And they're delicate flowers. So if I don't treat you in a manner that is celebratory of you, right time, right place, and I got to hit a bullseye with whatever's going on with you that day, then there's issue with my parenting style or with how you feel loved. You know what I'm saying? So on and so on. Right. So, what I tell my kids is, you know, you all, especially as they've gotten older, you all have to realize that I have a life outside of you as well, right? And that you got to see me more than just dad, right? And I have interests, outside of serving your needs, however immediate you feel they need to be, or right place, right time, right tone, so on and so on and so on. I think that is an issue that has to be factored in to the perspective we take on how kids feel. You see what I'm saying? And I think that's neglected a lot because, again, we feel like a kid has to always be entertained and happy and all of that. Like we don't allow kids to figure anything out on their own, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
we just don't do it. And as a result, you have kids that are zombies. right? When it comes to deductive reasoning and just flat out common sense. You know what I'm saying? So that gets morphed into, the bullying language, right? Or the lack of empathy language and all of that stuff. And I just think it has to be factored in.
Right.
Because
And I'm saying,
I'm gonna agree.
because I agree with what you're saying as well, right? All of those things are factors. My question is, where do the parents get that? Because those aren't like in our DNA, right? Those things have to be learned so that
Right.
they can be taught, right?
So
So so if you don't know how to navigate parenthood because maybe you didn't have a parent at home, maybe you didn't have a good example, and the only thing that you get now is 60-second clips of people's perfection, right?
right,
Then
right,
how, as a parent, if moving away from the kids, because I believe that that kid is brought up in that kid's personality is a direct reflection of those parents, right? And the freedoms that those parents have allowed that kid to explore, right?
right.
But if you don't have a good sense of the boundaries that those things should have, then we're going to get many different kids on the spectrum, good, bad, ugly, and indifferent, right?
Mhm.
So where do you think parents should start, especially fathers, right? Where should fathers start to be able to get the information or get the education or the training or the examples that they need to be better fathers in the household?
I think things like this, right, help. It's having dialogue. You know what I mean? Because you know you people don't hang out the way they used to. You know
Right.
what I mean? Just kind of converse and fellowship like we used to. Right? I know
Hmm.
I don't. And that's very deliberate. I don't. I just don't do that now. With being retired and all the other stuff. That's part of it. Um, with other men, right? But the big part about that is conversing with your spouse, right? Conversing
Hmm.
with your spouse and dialoguing on what is your value system in this matter, right? Because as it pertains, being a man, right? My wife and I bump heads a lot. We bumped
Right.
heads a lot on how we should handle issues within our home as it pertains to our children. You
Right.
know what I'm saying? And you can probably deduct how I see things, right? Right? You can probably already figure out how I see things, whereas my wife hadn't seen that all that time. And I look at it from, well, A, man, like you don't want to know the legitimate trauma I've lived through and overcome. You feel what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Right. So when I take that perspective, as it pertains to my children, it's hard for me to really empathize with some of the struggles, right, that you have, right? Especially if you don't communicate those struggles,
Right.
right? So the response I get to that is, well, Dad, you always overtalk me, or you always shut me down, blah blah blah. Okay, maybe that's so, right? Maybe that's so on occasion, but you don't ever have to worry about food, shelter, clothing, where your meals are coming from. You've never taken a city bus, right? None of those things. So understand it from my perspective, right? Understand it from my perspective, right? To a degree.
Right.
And remember, I'm consistent because in my mind, I want you prepared. I want
Right.
you prepared to be like, man, and I, I try to be humble. I try to teach my kids, or I've taught my kids humility, but like as I'm driving them to school, or like they all had cars, and you know what I'm saying? Like, look,
Mhm.
it's in September, it's still 100 plus degrees and kids are walking.
Right.
You don't have that issue. You know what I'm saying? Like when you get out, when you get home from school, I'm home. So
Right.
you can talk to me. I'm here. Right. But the thing is, we don't allow children to be challenged, right? So you asked the question earlier, well, where do kids get that? We get that, they, in my day, we got that from coaches. We got that from sports, right? We
Right.
got from from just, just hanging out at the park. You know what I'm saying? Older
You got it
friends,
from the
older,
OGs in the neighborhood, right? You got it
for sure,
from everybody.
for
But
sure,
nowadays you
right?
can't get that. Kids can't get that. You know
Nah,
what I'm saying? If they
you
want a
know,
coach, you got to pay it's $500 a month for a coach.
right, right,
You know what I'm saying?
right,
Like everything costs money. Everything isn't in reach. You know what I mean? Like it used to be, right? It used to those services used to just be a part of the community.
right,
Now they cut. Now they
right,
it all comes with a price tag.
right, right. And that is what it is. You know what I mean? Because we all, you learn more, you do more, time becomes, a little bit more meaningful for you or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but for me, I want to have meaningful relationships, right?
Right.
So if if more often than not in today's world, the relationships are transactional. So they cease to exist when it's
True.
not beneficial, right?
Right.
You don't get, hey man, you good, right? Anything I could do for you, or if and I'm not bragging or whatever, but I'm a servant, right? But if
Hmm.
I do this within reason, I don't do it all the time. It's hot, like if people need a ride, this is just an example of what I mean about servitude or whatever. If people are might be grocery shopping or walking down the street with a handful of bags, or they got kids with a stroller, and I feel relatively safe, a lot of times I'm pulling over, right? Hey man, where you going? Can I take you somewhere, or can I get you close to where you're going? That kind of thing. And that's just
Hmm.
an example of the type of empathy that I have to to use my eyes to make things better for other people,
For
right?
sure.
And I
I
can't
want
go ahead.
I want to push back on something that you said earlier before we get too far down the road.
Sure.
Because this is, and I'm only gonna say this because I feel like I've done this as well, right?
Mhm,
It's like on one hand, I don't believe that I should get rewarded for being a father,
mhm,
right? I
mhm,
believe that that's my job, that's my duty. I'm going to do that regardless, whether that kid was purple, blue, green, or whatever it is, right?
mhm,
That's my job. However, when my kid presents a need to me that I don't do, or they need that I don't, maybe I have some feelings or thoughts about it, I bring up those same things that I tell myself I don't need recognition for as the reason why I'm not doing the thing that my child is asking, right? So it's like, do I want to be recognized for the things that I do, or do I expand out what fatherhood is? Because I guess, in my opinion, I believe fatherhood is all of it. I believe it is that what you're describing, but it's
mhm.
also being able to recognize that my child might need something very specific from me, because
Like
she's trying
like
because she's
like
trying to because she or he is trying to translate something to me from their worlds that I'm not familiar with. And I'm going back to it because I remember having some of the same conversations that I had with my children when they were growing up, that I had at from the teenage side with my parents as I was growing up as well, right? Will
Mhm.
Smith got a song about it from the 80s, right? Parents just
It's
don't
just don't
understand,
understand.
right?
Of course. Yeah.
And I think that's going to be true forever and ever and ever, right? We're never going to understand the stuff that you dealt with. And I won't even say you, I'll just use me as the example, because my father has told me this on numerous occasions.
Mhm.
To my father, my generation is soft, right?
Sure. For sure.
And my kids' generation to me is soft.
Mhm,
And their generation is going to be the following generation is going to be soft to them as well.
mhm.
So I try not to be as rigid in my thinking, because I also believe that there's a possibility that I have raised my children for a world that they will never live in.
What do
So
you mean?
I can
What do you mean by
so
that?
because we live in a world right now. We've already kind of discussed a handful of the issues that are surrounding our families and our communities right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're being honest, it doesn't feel or seem like any of those issues are going to go away anytime soon,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which means that those issues are going to produce its own offspring, so to speak,
For sure.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
its own climate, its own life, its own whatever it is that our children are going to have to navigate. We don't know what the impacts of that are, right? I'm pretty sure, I'm not going to say that no one knew. I'm pretty sure we could have been smart, but I don't think anyone knew the impact that not having a father in the household at all would have on our community, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not that it would have a negative part, but that it will create a whole bunch of fathers who are going to overcompensate for the sins of their father, right? So
Well,
then,
that happens with mothers too.
yeah,
You know,
it
it
happens
happens
with
with
mothers,
parents.
and it
Yeah.
happens with fathers. It happens with everyone, right?
But
Like, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it because it just feels like, and maybe this is just being sensitive as a man, it gets magnified when men, overcompensate in today's world versus when women do, because women, you know, mothers celebrate and you kind of referenced it earlier, the judicial system is on their side,
Mhm.
right? On their side as it pertains to decision making and rearing of children, right? And it
Right.
produces a lot of mothers, right, who take, you know, a lot of different uh principles of being a mother into their own motherhood and how they interact with dads and other men. You
I
understand what I'm
understand.
saying? You
I
understand what
understand.
I'm saying? So, um, like I think it all needs to be addressed. But go ahead. You were
But
making.
we also have to take into consideration that there's a heap of fathers out here whose father chose not to be in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And that percentage is very, very high.
Mm-hmm.
It is much higher than some of the saucy ones, the saucy conversations that we have where the mom doesn't want the dad to be around
Right.
and pushes the man out. There's a lot more cases of the father choosing to not be around, and that's not the what's the word? It's not the stickler behind what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that all of these different reasons has created an environment that our children now have to live in. And then if you want to take it outside of fathers and mothers, like you said before, the social media, there our kids are they have so much more access to information now that as a parent, we can't just hit them with the, oh well, this is what it is, just because they'll just fact check it. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to take it into consideration whether you deal with it or don't deal with it, the kid still asks the question,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'll give you an example. When my daughter was in the fourth grade, third or fourth grade, she came home and asked us about sex, to which we were like, this ain't the time for you to learn about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? When I was growing up, mom or dad says that's the end of the story. There's nowhere else to go,
Right.
right?
Right.
2 days later, my child finds out what sex is because a kid at her school has a phone. They Googled it.
Mm-hmm.
So now I got a 7, 8 year old that has been exposed to pornography that we now have to deal with, right? To
Mm-hmm.
where that wasn't even applicable when I was growing up, right? Like there was like some recon had to happen for me to get my hands on a nudie magazine or or a porn tape or something like that, right?
Right.
Now it's so readily available that some of the conversations that we know that we need to have with our children are it's the today's society is forcing us to prematurely expose our children to these things just because of the world we live in. And all of us can't keep our kids out of that system. You know what I
Right,
mean? So I
right.
think there's a lot of variables in here. I agree with what you say at a foundation. I do have a little bit of room for the nuance of that topic, you know what I mean? And I do believe that as a father, setting the standard, you know what I mean, setting that example in advance, it goes a long way. But and I'll tell you, for me, I was a father at a young age. I'm only 40 years old, and my oldest child is 22 years old. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm.
And I got three in college, so I'm not bragging either. I got three in college, and you obviously, Coach Byrd, you coach my youngest son in
Right.
basketball. So, and that's my baby. He 14. My
Hmm.
baby meaning the youngest.
Right.
So like I 100% believe that, between my wife and I and our influence on our children has directly had an impact on the trajectory of my children's lives. However, me not taking into consideration society and how that has influenced my children has caused a lot of mistakes in my fatherhood over the years, if you know what I mean.
For sure. But so this is where I think lines get kind of blurred, right? You said a word, that I feel is very important, is just setting a standard, right?
Mhm.
Because again, I'm a coach, you know what I mean? I'm a teacher,
Mhm.
and all of those things, you know, typically lend to direct accountability, right? And direct influence over children once they leave the home, right? And those are trusted, right? Those are trusted positions, right? As like we trust parent, teachers, almost the way we got to trust pilots when we take a flight. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta feel like, hope that they're doing what they're supposed to, what they're doing their job, right? Molding children and all of the other stuff. Um, but we, but we, and I say we, I speak of our society, is we don't allow that to happen in a lot of cases too often. We don't allow a teacher to create a standard, right, to where 30 kids or more, right, depending on what school you're at, have to adhere to the system. And if the kid doesn't like that, right, or feels that they're being targeted slash bullied, blah blah blah, because maybe they may not have been, you know, I'll give you an example, right? I'll give you an example. I was fortunate to have been selected to teach, right? Especially during the COVID era, and um, we had, a parent, I'm sorry, a student, they had like these little Friday, whatever they would call it, these Friday, bonus sessions, during the COVID area where, you had 2 and 2, red and yellow, I mean, red and black, or was it red? Whatever, red and yellow. And on Friday was like a tutoring day, right?
Right.
And, they brought me in to tutor, right? First grade. And I gave my notes, right? I worked with the kids and I gave the notes and I hand wrote a note, right? And sent it home to the student. And I come in on Monday and I get this, I have this apologetic email from a parent saying that I hope that, you know, uh, you want my kid back in your classroom. I didn't mean it. And they hadn't read the note, right? All that parent went off of was the fact that what I wrote in the note was what, my observations on what would help the kid read better, right? But I also believe that the kid isn't trying her hardest, right? So trying her hardest was the trigger for the kid to go home crying to the mom, and the mom went directly to the vice, the assistant principal over first, second grade or whatever, who said, "Hey, I want him out of there. I want him fired. All of this, blah 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 blah." Right? Well, she hadn't read the note. she just went off of tears.
Mm.
You know what I mean? She just went off of tears. And the email said, I'm so sorry. The fact that you took the time to handwrite a note and gave all of these very specific observations on what you've done to help the kid get better says a lot. And you're the best. You're the only, at the time the kid was only first grade, second grade, but they had been through maybe like 3 or 4 teachers already, right? And they had, according to them, a lot of bad, experiences with those teachers, right? But and again, unbeknownst to me, I don't know any of this is happening, right? So she went after my job because the kid was uncomfortable and crying and quote unquote challenged, right? I just challenged the kid. I think you can do better.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So by the end of the year, right? Let me say this too. I'm gonna add to that, right? I don't allow kids to whisper, right? Sit up, this was kindergarten, first grade, second grade. Sit up and speak in command voice, right?
Mm.
Like, you're a military guy. Sit up, sit up straight and don't mumble and don't look down and look me in the eyes when you talk to me, and speak to me with your command voice, right? Where you might have, like kids were like, like, dang, this dude is torturing us, right? Well, by the end of the year, bro, by the end of the year, I didn't have to say that. And I wasn't yelling it, but I just created a standard where you have that in you. I'm going to pull it out of you,
Right.
right? I want to pull it out of you. You see what I'm doing? It may make you comfortable in the interim, right? But it's going to serve you better. Man, do you know how many gifts and doggone, like clothes and ties that same student, right? They left the school after that year, but that student still follows me, maybe not so much this past year, but for like 2 or 3 school years after that, all because I created a standard. Now, you had teachers coming in. I don't know what you're doing in here, Mr. Byrd, right? But you have the best behaved classroom in first grade or in second grade or whatever, because the standard is what it was, right? So the consistency of such will travel, kind of like what we said earlier, right?
Right.
It will
And I'm
travel.
with you.
You know what I'm saying?
I'm
And
with you. I'm lucky because I'm lucky enough to have done 2 interviews back to back with Black male teachers.
Mhm.
You and we got another teacher on the interview before. It was
Right.
and it's so great, and it definitely highlights, the impact of strong male role models in our school system. You know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Mhm.
However, especially if you're Black and you're working in Black communities where the kids are predominantly brown, right?
Mhm.
But that number is like 2% across the nation. You
Right.
know what I mean? And unfortunately, everyone doesn't get Mr. Byrd. You know what I mean?
True, but let me add to
And
that, man.
and real quick, because I do want to hear what you
Yeah.
have to say. Because
Yeah.
one of the things that I feel that is like one of the biggest breakdowns in our society is that we have lost trust in all of our major systems. We have
Mhm.
lost trust in our financial system. We have lost trust in our education system, our law systems, judicial systems and political systems for sure. I think the fabric of society is breaking down just because we don't have trust in them. You know what I mean? So
Right.
how do you deal with some of that stuff? Because on one hand, I agree with what you're saying. Like I agree with everything. There are definitely parents out there who want to idolize their children and put them on a pedestal and everything else. And then there's just as many parents who just don't trust that the school system has their kids' best interests at heart. So they're uber reluctant to believe anything that comes out of the educator's mouth. And I only say that because I'm married to one, right? My wife is a first grade teacher and she works in Title I schools in some of the worst neighborhoods. These students come from all types of crazy backgrounds, right? Where that kids living in cars with their parents at the park, I've mentioned this on the show a handful of times before, but like my wife had a kid in her class that didn't speak, like
Mhm.
just would not speak and
Mhm.
didn't speak the entire year. Another kid banging his head on the table, flipping chairs up, ripping them in half. Like, and there's no way to mitigate some of those problems for those teachers. So what do you believe is missing in these environments to do two things: build trust in these systems, especially our education system and the teachers that are involved, but also understand that the the nuance of these kids that we're now having to deal with, right? Like I for me, my vantage point looking out into the world is we may not see the same kid all the time, right? Like you may see a very specific kid and have interactions with kids who don't want accountability, to where from my vantage points and where I've been and volunteering in the school systems, I see kids who have a lot of potential but don't have any of the support. It's like Maslow's laws, right? If you're not
Hierarchy.
getting your hierarchy of, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
So if
yeah,
you're
yeah.
not if you're not if these kids don't have the first two rungs, right, then how can we expect them to step into our schools and behave and do everything? And I believe that they do, especially if they can find hope, right? And most of the time, that hope comes in the form of a teacher who believes in them, gives them a standard that they can hold. You know what I mean, and upheld. Because a lot of teachers may not have a a rigid standard that the students even know that they can meet. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I
Well,
think. Go ahead.
well,
Go ahead.
you said part of the answer for me anyway is the standard, right? So you look at the military, right? You know, you talked about kids that come from you know, sleeping in cars with their parents, to kids who may, you know, be 6, 7 figures, right? But what happens to all of those kids when we get the basic training? We're broken down the same, right? The standard is the standard, right? The objective is the objective, right? It doesn't matter where you've come from, it's still the same, right? So there's a commonality you know, a commonality and a uniting force that get people to act, no matter where you come from, right? So by creating a standard, an achievable standard, you know what I mean? It's got to be something that they can reach. You know,
Right.
that's part of the answer, right? You got to be consistent with that standard, right? And then as it pertains to trust, right? You got to wrap your arms around them, right? Not necessarily, you know, in the literal sense,
Mm-hmm.
but they got to feel like, man, this dude he ain't no butthole. You know what I'm saying? You know, he legitimately cares, right? Or she legitimately cares, right? And they'll see that, right? Because now I'm speaking as a coach, as a parent, and as an educator, right? One thing you cannot do, one thing you cannot do is is expect the game to not find you out, right? You know, kids are going to know when you're being real with them, and they're going to know when you're being superficial with them, right?
Absolutely.
Don't matter.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter what age they are. It doesn't matter what they've been exposed to. One parent, two parents, zero parents, being raised by siblings. Doesn't matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Challenge their brain, right? Challenge their brain. Hold them to. You know, I'll give you another example, right? You know, like I'm big on eye contact, and I'm big on humanity. When you walk in my class, you know, like my second year, I was teaching junior high, right? Kids walk in, don't speak. Hey, walk back out, start over. You address me, good morning, Mr. Byrd, or you know, whatever the time of day is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, at first it was like, you know what I'm saying? But by you know, second quarter,
Right.
you know, that
Hey,
was the
don't
that
even
was
have
the
to ask. Hey, Mr. Bird, how you doing?
You know what I'm saying? You know,
Yep.
in between, go out and stand in the hall in between class periods. They're running it. Mr. Bird, can I stay in your class this period? Blah, blah, blah. Same kids that, at the end of the year, there's like, I hated coming to your class. I didn't think I was gonna make it. At
Mm-hmm.
parent conference, you know what I mean? Like I told the kids I was leaving. You know what I mean? I started taking my stuff off the wall in the third quarter. I'm like, man, y'all don't appreciate people who care about y'all. You know what I'm saying? You know, and I was at a school where teachers were leaving literally every week. And I was like, man, this isn't, like I don't want to, be stressed because I'm trying to give y'all what I know y'all need.
Right.
Right. And up to that point, bro, I hadn't taken any time off. You know what I'm saying? I hadn't taken any sick leave or any of that. Well, I started using my time, and I would use like 3 days, and I wouldn't tell them, right, that I was going to be gone. So when I came back, like on a Monday or whatever, man, I got mobbed. Mr. Byrd, please don't leave us. Stay with us. Blah blah blah. You know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? And it's
Yep.
because, you know, like we don't allow. Here's another thing, bro. We don't allow time to do what time does in a
Like that.
positive sense. You feel what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like we want a finished product in a week,
Right.
right? 2 weeks. Where you're
We
not, you're
don't we
like,
don't want to we don't want to put the work in.
we don't want to put the work in, or
Brick
you don't
brick by brick, bird by bird, right?
like you know, I'm a big believer, and I don't even know if this is really true. I'm not a gardener, but you know, from what I know, the last thing to grow on a fruit tree is what? The fruit.
Fruit.
Feel what I'm saying? That's the last thing that comes from all of this work, right? The tilling of the
Yep.
soil and the, you know, the watering and all of that stuff. We don't allow that to take place anymore, right? So if a kid, right, back to parenting, you know, within our homes,
Mm-hmm.
educating within the school system, coaching within the athletic system. If a kid complains, bro, it becomes Armageddon.
Mm.
You feel what I'm saying? Right? And that got to stop. Right? That's got to stop because you're losing. That's why I'm not teaching today. That's why I'm not coaching today. Right?
Mm.
Because like, man, I got better things to do with my time than to be going back and forth with parents who aren't putting that time in. You know, like right now, I
Right.
guarantee it's June 18th. Kids been out of school for about what, 3 weeks, maybe?
Yeah.
Right? I guarantee you, it's parents like, I can't wait till you go
Can't
back to school.
wait.
You know what I'm saying? I can't wait
Yeah.
till you go back to school. Let your teachers deal with this. I guarantee you that,
I
right?
agree.
But we can't tell your kids to sit down and be quiet, or we can't raise our voice at your kids. Man, get out of here with that. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? Like I was coaching this past year, man, and I got a kid, bro. You know, you could tell they ain't put in no work all over the summer. You know what I'm saying? They put in no work, right? But expect to be treated with like royalty, right? And he curses at his parents,
Mm.
right? And he talks back to his parents. I'm like, hey man, I don't know what you do when you get home, but we're not doing that here, right? So it became a problem all season long, right? To the point where, you know, like I had kids saying that I ran them too much,
Mm.
right? So, you know, we, you know, ran, you know, tired, you know, all of that. I don't want to get into all of that, but
Right, right,
all of
right.
that becomes it becomes a a a cop out. And I'm not putting everything on parents either, right? You do have some, you know, teachers that don't really invest
Right.
what we need to invest in, coaches
Right.
and all that, right? It's a responsibility for all of us, right? But this goes back to what I said when we first started. And I'm old school. I take the charge of manhood, fatherhood, humanity very seriously, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I won't deviate from that. Kind of like what I said with you, what I believe in and the principles of those things of manhood, of humanity, of fatherhood stands the test of time. You know, and it goes back to lions, right? The role of a male lion in the pride is vastly different from the role of the female lions.
Mm-hmm.
Vastly different, right? You cannot expect a male lion to be a female lion, bro. You feel what I'm saying? And in society today, it's too much of that. You
I
see what I'm
get you.
saying? It's way too much of that. So if you just understand that, and then here's the other thing: take the time to understand, man, what is that? What's the motivating factor of that lion? You feel what I'm saying? Same thing of of that female lion of the pride, right? If you understand that, man, I think most problems will be mitigated at the source. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I'm saying? Will be, you know, but we gotta, you know, like, you know, we're into sports. And me and my son were talking about how the NBA has this challenge system, right? Where like if a call is wrong, they have an ability to go, you know, throw the challenge to get it overturned. And I'm like, every time somebody doesn't agree with a call, they're doing this, challenge it. I
Yeah.
don't like the call,
Yep. Yep.
right? Now,
Saw it all finals you saw it.
yeah,
Luca.
and
Challenge the call.
and it takes away human error, right? Or just the fact that there's going to be mistakes.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? You know, like you're using that challenge flag in the second quarter when, like, man, it's 2 points, it's still a lot of game left. But when you really need it, you know what I'm saying?
Right, right,
That do-over, you don't have it anymore. Right.
right,
So we're wearing out all of these quote unquote luxuries. Uh, like in the home, it might be a family meeting. You know what I'm saying? At school, it might be a parent-teacher conference, right? And any other, like, but what happens? Okay, now let's take this forward into adulthood. How many doggone visits are you going to get with the boss, right? And say, you know what, hey man, I don't like the way you expected me to have this done by such and such date, or I don't like the way you looked at me, or I don't like the way you you yelled at me or you embarrassed me or whatever. How
right,
many how is that going to work out for you?
right,
How is that going to work out for you? You see what I'm saying? And that's where I come from in most things is, hey, this this cocoon that your parents and your mom and your dad have you wrapped up in, it's not realistic, bro. You know what I'm saying? Or baby, young lady, it's not realistic. So yeah, understand you're gonna be challenged. You're not gonna like it. My oldest daughter is upset with me right now. I don't care. I stand by it. I stand by my perspective, right?
right,
You know what I'm saying? Because I got time on my side, and I got the fact that I love you more than I love me. You feel what I'm saying? Right?
right.
I love you more than I love me.
Yeah.
Right? That
So I
and
love you
that's
so much, I'm gonna tell you the truth.
exactly. But we don't allow that to happen. We don't allow that to happen in most cases. We have to justify. Can you
Mm,
explain? You know what I mean? Can you explain why you said this? I could, but why? You know what I'm saying? Like, is the like what's the outcome? You know what I mean? Are we just trying, well, I got an email that I got to answer. You don't. If you just tell a parent we're handling it internally, right? I'll take your issue under advisement, right? And if it becomes a further issue, then we'll let it, take its natural course on the severity of the punishment or whatever happens. But today there has to be I guess a sort of get back on whatever a kid or a spouse has in that moment, right? I was embarrassed, so I got to embarrass you back, or you got to lose your job, or you know what I mean. You got to in order to get me to trust you again, we got to go, on this flamboyant trip, or all of this other jibber jabbish,
mm,
whatever, man. If you want to do that, fine. If that's what you do, fine. But man, like we're human beings, bro. Like these things have made people feel like they have to be, wined and dined and, treated as, and I say celebrity all the time, but celebrities don't even need to be treated like celebrities. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it's hard, like you use the word rigid. I guess I'm rigid in that regard, man. But like, man, I'm a lion, bro. You know what I mean? Like that's that's how I march. You know what I mean? Like lines. So kid, like all of my kids, man, they all got their own phone. They all got TVs in their rooms. They got a refrigerator full of food. They have educated parents. They have parents that have encouraged them to speak their mind, blah, blah, blah. Right. But I also have kids that don't want to take challenges. You feel what I'm saying? That don't
mm.
want to take challenges. Now, like for me, I'm going to challenge you back because I've done the work. I'm not going to speak on things that I don't know or have the experience in. Right. So if you want my perspective and you ask for it, be prepared for the answer. You know what
Right,
I'm saying? Be prepared for the answer. Like most times, we're not prepared for what my answer might be, especially if it doesn't align with what you want it to be or what you believe your answer to be. You see what I'm saying? Then it's, it gets masqueraded or portrayed as hating or toxic masculinity or all of these things that really is just a person's perspective on parenting, on fatherhood, on a number of things. But really in too many cases, the only thing that seems to matter is what serves that person in that moment. right? And in most cases, they don't even care about you, right? They just care what's good for them. You know what I'm saying? So like I always ask or do my best to how are you doing today? Like I find myself when I especially when I go to places, how if I ask, or I need this or can you blah blah blah, I make sure to say how you doing today, right? Because I want that person to know I see you as a person, right?
Right.
More than a person that's serving me in a certain
And
right.
now that your kids are older, do you do the same thing to them too?
Absolutely.
Now it's like transitioning from, treating them like obviously now I have what, three older kids, and transitioning from, the standard that I had as a dad is still the same standard. It just sounds a little bit different now because you're an adult. So
Right.
now
Right.
it comes in, maybe advice versus instruction, right? It comes in perspective versus, direct answers to these questions or whatever it may be.
I'll give you a real world example. My daughter was like, Dad, all my kids wear glasses, right?
Right.
Dad, when does my eye exam expire? I don't know. Call them. You know what I'm saying? Call them. You got the number, call and make your own appointment.
Right.
But they get, like, they want to be treated as adults. And you're going to find this as your kids get older and older. Well, you got a 26-year-old, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to be treated as a man, but like, you got to know when I need to be treated as a kid too. Like,
Right.
it doesn't work that way. You
Yep.
know what I'm
They
saying?
don't.
Does not work that way, right? Like I'll create an environment. My son is going through this right now. You know what I mean? I'm letting him kind of figure out some of this stuff on his own, in terms of dealing with his issues. Man, I'm here. I've deposited literally every ounce of knowledge that I have into him, right? From man
Mm-hmm.
to man. He gets a totally different type of tone and conversation than what my daughters get,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right. And it's up to him on do I receive. Now you ask, my son is you've met my son. He's very soft
Mm-hmm.
spoken and quiet.
Yep. My
Uh
oldest son is like that actually. He reminds me a lot of my oldest. He
yeah,
very soft spoken, doesn't have a lot to say, and like trying to get, like, if you're not right up on him when he's talking to you, damn near can't even hear him.
yeah. Yeah. But my son will also say, like he graduated and like, his basketball accolades, and he'll reference me and he'd be like, man, if it wasn't for this man, I wouldn't, you know what I mean? Or whatever. And,
Yep.
and, I, and I don't do it for that. Right. But, it hits me right in the heart. You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Oh.
Because despite the exterior, right. And I'm cursed, me personally, I'm cursed with what appears to be a permanent scar. Right. And, makes it like I'm always angry or mad when that's not the
Yeah.
case. Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I have kind of a penetrating voice too. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Uh, but if you look past that, man, you'll find that, man, this dude is about other people. You know what
I
I'm
like
saying?
that. I
You know what I
like
mean?
that.
He's about other people, and everything about him, supports that. You know what I'm saying?
I like that. And I want to kind of change gears. Excuse me. I want to change gears just a little bit because I definitely want to make some space for you to tell us a little bit about only three snacks and how you got there.
For sure.
Because all of our conversations that we had about parenting, man, I 100% agree with a lot of what you said. Obviously I have my own discrepancies, but it ain't discrepancies as no's. It's more discrepancies as I believe that, but I also have a couple other rungs that I have added to that space for myself that fits with my lifestyle because I have a blended family, right? So
Sure.
my oldest son is not biologically mine. He is mine because I raised him since he was 2 years old. And then
Mhm.
my daughter, I have my daughter when I came back from Iraq, from a previous relationship. So my wife and I only have two. So there's a
Sure.
lot of moving pieces in my family that I have to take into consideration. But from the foundational stance, like I love how you stand. Like if there's anything that I want people to get from this is that as a father, you got to have a standard of some sort. I don't
Mhm.
care what the hell that standard is. You choose that standard for yourself and what's right for you, but it needs to be a standard. And oftentimes when we get into this parenting thing, we have ideas, but we're not sure about our ideas. So we let our kids and our wives and society influence them to and get us off of our rockers, right?
Hmm.
Like we have to stick to your standards, stick to what you know is right, and give those children exactly what you know to be right because they'll be better for it. But I do want to make time for you to tell us a little bit about your health story and your transition from full-fledged meat eater like myself into a alkaline vegan and only three snacks. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I have been plant-based for 7 years now.
Mm,
May 5th of 2017 is where I completely stopped eating um, meat and things that come from animals, um, because I have a very strict ingredient diet. Um, that I adhere to as
mm,
part of my alkalinity or pursuit of alkalinity, and it's for no other reason other than, well, I shouldn't say no other reason, but the motivator was just feeling better, right? Wanting to feel more like I used to feel when I was younger, and pre-injuries and things of that nature, and I made the choice to go plant-based. So that was 2017. 2018, I'm into my new lifestyle and enjoying it. I'm feeling good. My body has responded favorably. But the biggest challenge is, finding adequate meal sources or sources when I travel. We spoke earlier. We did a lot of traveling. My son played basketball. So did my daughter. So we spent a lot of time on the go. Um, so during that time, I had stumbled across a recipe that eventually became my original and sea salt snack crisp, using and we only use three ingredients with that: spelt flour, spring water, and sea salt, right? So that's how we got the name Only Three, right? Because there
gotcha.
was only three ingredients. And at the time I only had one flavor. I wasn't really looking to go into a business,
Hmm.
right? Whatever. It was just, it just kind of happened, right? And then the world stopped during quarantine. And as part of, my constant servitude, man, I was retired from the Air Force when all that happened, right? So I had no idea how to do a Zoom call. You know what I'm saying? But we all quickly learned how to do that. I wasn't working, I was retired, I'm retired.
Right.
So I didn't really have a need for all of that. But anyway, um, I reached out to some family members back in Ohio and, from around the country in Ohio, and say, hey, um, I think that, I can help you all with budgeting, financial budgeting, with these spreadsheets. At that time I had been using for 20 plus years that served me. Would anybody be willing to get on a Zoom call and just kind of go over that? So four other family members, took me up on that, right? And
Mm,
myself and four other people, my brother and a few cousins. And we would get on a weekly call. We got on a weekly call, and they're like, "Man, this is great. I could, I hadn't seen this perspective. It's helping me. Blah blah blah. We want more. Let's invest, right?" And then that led to let's become a business. We brainstorm, yada yada yada. So by then, I was fully into making my chips, and I knew then that I had a product that other people could benefit from, but I didn't want to be in business again. My wife and I used to have a home care business, and I
okay.
was just chilling, right? I was comfortable with life. You know what I mean? I was retired. I was there for my kids. I could come and go as I please, blah, blah, blah. I didn't want to be in business again after having had a 10-year franchise. But life didn't have that for us, right?
So
So we formed a business, um, under a different name, and eventually it became known as Only Three Snacks, based here out in Nevada, right? We
gotcha.
now have, we now have 9 products, right? 5 different flavors of snack crisps that are made with spelt flour, a couple of energy bars, that are made with high quality ingredients, and also a couple of different flavors of trail mix that are made with 100% organic ingredients, right? We don't use any additives or preservatives. We don't use any artificial sweeteners. We do use organic agave and natural date sugar. Um, but the premise of our whole existence, man, is to provide choices for people who care, who truly care about what they eat,
Right.
right? You know what I mean? And, you know, we mentioned trust a lot in this discussion. A lot of times we you know, whatever we eat, we trust that it's gonna, you know, it's gonna be good for us, or it serves our needs, or we just completely disregard it,
Right.
right? Well, we've created something for people who have strict, you know, standards for what they put in their mouth. I believe every ingredient that we use serves our body in a favorable way, and you know we're building that.
But
Uh,
outside of that,
mhm.
I want to make it known this shit is delicious.
Thank you,
Outside
sir.
of all this organic
Thank you, sir. I appreciate
blah
it.
that he throwing down here, don't let it fool
Yeah.
you. These the salt, the lime joints and the cinnamon joints, them those are absolutely delicious. Like I was amazed that they taste so good and only had three ingredients myself. Right. Like I
Hmm.
was like, this is three ingredients. It tastes exactly like a chip. It tastes exactly like a chip.
Well,
And then
I don't
that
want
hint of
people.
lime though. Whew,
Yeah, I don't want
and
people
that
to be.
cinnamon.
Yeah, I don't want people to be confused. They don't all have only in three ingredients,
Right.
but
Just the
all the
first one. We understand,
yeah.
but the main source of the crisp is three
Four.
ingredients. So
Yes.
even if you
Yes.
added a little lime flavor to the
Right.
salt, that
Right.
I'm talking about
Right.
just the crisp. Like just the crisp
Right.
is three ingredients and
Yes,
they
sir.
taste amazing. Like
Right.
he's gonna hit you with the science, he's gonna hit you with all of the formal talk, but one of the main reasons why we buy treats and snacks is because they taste good, and oftentimes the healthier the snack, the worse it tastes, and that is not the case with these only three snacks. That I'm telling you, do yourself a favor and at least get either the lime ones or the cinnamon ones, because the cinnamon ones comes with this little cinnamon gel that you can put on it. Woo, that junk
Yeah.
is fire, baby. That junk is fire.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely do yourself a favor and get those. We
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then if you're listening to this, we'll put the links and everything in the description in the show notes so that you can click on it and get it. I'll actually put a direct link to purchase the lime ones and the cinnamon ones because you gotta
Yes,
at least get those.
yes, sir. Yeah, we got, you know, I think we're covering a lot. We're covering a lot of ground with that, man. And we got something for everybody. You know what I mean? And we're constantly expanding. You know, I put something out there today. You know, eventually, you know, we hope to add juices. You know, we hope
Mm,
to add healthy meal preps.
nice.
You know, just adapting to the needs of the modern consumer. Uh, you know, and it's what like I said, we created the line for ourselves, and we just took it to market. You know what I'm
That's
saying?
awesome.
We just took it to market.
That's awesome. And I hope that in the future, as our Good Dads program grows, that we're able to, maybe even go in together on something, maybe a sponsorship of some sort, man.
Sure.
Figuring out something to work together. Cause I believe what you believe, like you said early on, is that we have to build our own communities. We have to, and that starts with building relationships. And I
Right.
went to, full disclosure, when we met, I was on a mission to go to that men's conference and meet friends, meet some people that I could build friendships with, whether that was real regular friendships or even, work friendships, just something to where we can be more collaborative, because I heard what you said that first night. We
Mm-hmm.
need to be more collaborative and we need to be able to get around people to do the work. Because at the end of the talks, we got to go do the work, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So, so I want to end the show on that. I want to thank you, Coach Bird. Which one you want to go by? Coach Bird, Mr. Bird, Damion.
Damion is good, bro. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Yeah,
So,
it's all good.
So yeah, I want to thank Damion for coming on to the show, man. This has been a pleasure. I really, really enjoyed your perspective. I think that perspective is missing in a lot of fathers as we have told our men to soften up. I think I think they may have they're trending to go a little too far, and there still needs to be a standard that you uphold. I'm not very religious or anything like that, but I don't shy away from solid teaching and philosophy, and the standard is the standard,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And being a standard bearer has always been a charge for a man, for the men
Hmm.
of those communities, and I hope that the men heal so that the toxic part of the masculinity doesn't seep out.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hey, I'm gonna be honest. It hadn't seeped in with me, bro. You know what
I feel you.
I'm Hey, like I heard that term, like real quick, my brother had a podcast. I'm like, bro, why are you talking about this, man? You know what
Right.
I'm saying? Like, why are we entertaining that, bro? We don't need to entertain that. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can have
Mhm.
private discussions, but we don't need to have a podcast about it, bro. You know what I mean? Let's talk privately so we can resolve whatever issue we got.
Mhm.
Give that power. That's me,
Right. I
right?
understand. I still
That's
might
me,
do me a show on what toxic masculinity and turn it into like a disbanding the myth or something like that.
right? What if and you may do this, but like I would like to come back. I would love to come back, right?
For sure. For sure.
But I want to come back and at least include how can we grow our communities financially. You know what I'm
For
saying?
sure. Yep.
Within our own means, right?
Hmm.
Within our own means, right? Because that's something that checks all the boxes,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like if we can grow financially, and it don't take a lot, like collaboration, right? Commit to collaboration,
Right.
commit to serving ourselves for ourselves. I have endless energy for that, bro.
And I have endless energy for that as well. I absolutely love Damion Byrd. I think he is definitely a renaissance man. He doesn't allow the things that are happening in our society to kind of sway his opinion. And he's been fairly successful at that. I think one thing that he identified was at the end of the day, he does what he thinks he's supposed to do for his family. And what is missing or what's missed in that is that that's not up for debate. It's not up for debate from me. It's not up to debate from you. And it's definitely not up to debate for his kids. His children don't understand what he has gone through for them to have what they have. And it is an impossible mission to explain. So you have to just buckle down and do what you believe is right. And I really appreciate Damion for sharing that with the group. I had to cut it right there because after that, we continued to talk for another hour just about, how we can impact our communities and what aspects of our businesses can we sync together on. We went in, and maybe I'll drop some of that content later, but I wanted to stop it right there because it was potent. So thank you all for listening to the Good Dads podcast. Like, subscribe, share with other dads just like you. Take care.